Welcome back to Royal Watch Daily, your reliable source for thoughtful, in-depth coverage and the hidden dimensions of stories involving Catherine, Princess of Wales, and the royal family. We're honored you're here as we unpack this profound moment with respect for history, duty, and the human cost behind every decision. Buckingham Palace's 14-word statement regarding Archie's future did not arrive with dramatic fanfare. It did not explode like a scandalous headline or leak through tabloid whispers. Instead, it landed with something far more unsettling: cold precision. Carefully timed, quietly released, and devastating in impact. At exactly 7 p.m., buried within what appeared to be an ordinary palace communication, those 14 words triggered what insiders now describe as a full-scale constitutional emergency. This was not gossip. This was not speculation. This was the Crown itself, through official language, publicly questioning the legitimacy of a child who stood sixth in line to the British throne. What followed was not merely the collapse of a carefully managed public image, but the unraveling of a family, a marriage, and a long-protected royal narrative. This was the Crown defending itself. This was institutional survival over personal loyalty, and it changed everything. Shockwaves in Montecito. In Montecito, California, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across an estate built not just as a home, but as the headquarters of a global brand. Prince Harry was mid-conversation with a podcast producer when his phone began to vibrate violently on the table beside him. This was not a casual alert. It was relentless. The device rattled so intensely it slid off the table and hit the floor. When Harry reached for it, the screen was already flooded. Missed calls, urgent texts, breaking news alerts, BBC, Reuters, The Guardian, royal correspondents, former allies. Everyone was calling. One notification stood out. Certain irregularities concerning the circumstances of Master Archie's birth are now under consideration. No explanation, no reassurance, no compassion. This was not the tabloid press he had fought his entire life. This was the voice of the institution he was born into, the monarchy itself, turning its power toward his child. According to those close to him, Harry froze. His face drained of color, his hands shook uncontrollably. He tried calling London, old numbers, familiar voices, but no one answered. The silence told him everything. The decision had already been made. The palace was prepared. This was not impulsive. This was not revenge. It was the final act of a conflict that had been quietly unfolding behind palace doors for years. The monarchy had reached a conclusion that would haunt them all. The risk of an unstable succession was greater than the fallout of sacrificing a king's own son. For centuries, the Crown has survived not on popularity, but on documentation, legality, and continuity. When those foundations are threatened, sentiment becomes irrelevant. And the cracks, insiders say, began with Archie's birth. The questions no one could ignore. Official statements said Archie was born at the Portland Hospital, yet unusually, traditional royal protocols were missing. There were no clearly published medical confirmations, no standard documentation entered public record in the way every royal birth before him had been. Instead, the palace used carefully neutral phrasing. The Duchess has had a baby. Not delivered by, not born under supervision, and not certified by. To constitutional experts, that wording mattered. Over time, inconsistencies mounted. Medical professionals quietly questioned timelines. Analysts examined images. Palace lawyers flagged missing or delayed paperwork, records that normally become part of Britain's permanent historical archive. Individually, none of this proved wrongdoing. Collectively, it created a dossier that could no longer be dismissed. The file on William's desk. For 18 months, a confidential file circulated at the highest levels of government, from the king's private office to the cabinet office. Those who saw it say it was disturbing not for what it claimed, but for what it documented. The most alarming detail involved private knowledge of a physical mark on Archie, information so specific that only a handful of people could possibly have known. When Prince William was shown the section, witnesses say he remained silent for over a minute. Then he asked one question: how many people knew this? The answer sealed the outcome: no more than 5. At that moment, a family issue became a constitutional threat. A question that changed everything. Harry returned to London in a state of desperation. At Windsor Castle, in a private chamber, he faced his brother not as family, but as the future king. William asked him directly, "Did Meghan give birth to Archie?" Harry could not answer. After a long, unbearable pause, he whispered, "I don't know, not for certain." That uncertainty changed the fate of everyone involved. Legal advice was clear. If Parliament determined that any aspect of a royal birth had been misrepresented, succession rights could be challenged in court. This was no longer about image. This was about law. The fallout. Back in California, Meghan's anger turned to fear. Legal threats were useless against an institution holding more documentation than she ever could. Discovery would expose everything. Harry returned changed, quiet, resigned. When Meghan accused him of choosing the palace over her family, he answered softly but firmly, "I'm choosing the truth for Archie, for Lilibet." That was the moment their united front collapsed. The aftermath. Buckingham Palace made an unthinkable choice and survived, scarred but standing. Harry withdrew from public life, focusing inward. Meghan's projects stalled, not cancelled, but quietly abandoned. And 2 children who never asked for any of this will grow up under a shadow they did not create. As one royal author put it, "Power built on illusion always falls." The only question now is how much damage is done before the dust finally settles. But even as the headlines slowly faded, the consequences did not. Behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, the machinery of monarchy continued its work, quietly, methodically, without emotion. Committees reviewed files, legal experts refined language, advisors prepared for every possible scenario, including ones the public might never hear about. This was never meant to humiliate, it was meant to contain. Inside royal circles, the understanding was grim but clear. Once doubt enters the official record of succession, it can never be fully erased. Even if no formal action is ever taken, the question itself becomes permanent. History does not forget uncertainty, it catalogs it. For Prince Harry, that reality became impossible to escape. The fight he once believed was against the media was now unmistakably against documented fact. The institution he thought he had outrun had simply waited, patiently, until the moment it could no longer remain silent. For Meghan, the loss was different, but equally devastating. Her greatest strength, control of narrative, had been neutralized by an authority that does not argue publicly, does not explain itself fully, and does not retreat once constitutional lines are crossed. Silence, in this case, was not weakness, it was power. And, for the monarchy, the damage was real, but calculated. Trust had fractured, but legitimacy remained intact. The crown demonstrated a truth that few institutions dare to admit openly. Survival sometimes demands sacrifice, even when that sacrifice shares your blood. What happens next may never be announced in dramatic statements or press conferences. Instead, it will unfold slowly, in legal footnotes, in revised records, and in careful omissions, and in the long memory of history. One thing, however, is already certain. The 14 words did what they were designed to do. They stopped a question from growing into a threat, they forced a reckoning no interview could undo, and they ensured that the line of succession, however bruised, remained legally defensible. This was not just a royal family dispute. This was a moment when myth collided with documentation, and documentation won. And, as history has always shown, when the crown chooses certainty over sentiment, there is no appeal left to make. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit that like button for the royal drama. Like this. Goodbye.